I don't think we have a shared understanding of what education is for. I think that's one of the problems. Instead of asking ourselves, what do I need to be successful, in terms of a job, what do I need in my life will help us to be successful. We're going to cut playtime short because we're going to practice our writing. That seems wrong. Children learn through play. When we came to opening fully after COVID, I really hoped that there would be a national debate about the purpose of education, because that laid bare some of the fictions. Very clear that what was really needed was, we're doing a really bad job of childcare. And we're also doing a really bad job, I think, for our children for education. SAT scores for primary schools, they keep saying that we're getting better. But I keep wondering what the cost is going to be for our children. Why are we just rolling down the expectations for children? Let's not prepare them. Let's let them live in the moment that they are. So many of our children, this is what's really worrying to me, so many of our children we can now see are not the right shape for our schools that we have. And yet we are still trying to change the children and not the schools. It was in my face that schools are not safe places for some children. The really sad thing about SATs is that they are really not about measuring children and children's progress. They are about measuring schools. They do cost people their lives. If those things are pressure and feeling inadequate and feeling like nobody cares and like you don't have any worth, why are we putting that onto kids? That's horrific. Instead, we should look at childhood. We should embrace it. We should nurture it. We should protect it. And we should bring the joys of childhood into adulthood. I think asking children what they want to be when they're older is the wrong question.
If I can, I want to read the letter that you wrote to the kids. I've got this letter.
I remember writing that. And I just remember my big worry was that life isn't a race. Life should be rich and full, and we should enjoy every minute of it.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. We're sharing the stories of our guests. I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey.
Need a new van? Why not pop down to Rivervale in Brighton? Explore our range of new and used vans, lovingly prepared and ready to work just as hard as you do. Rivervale, making motoring manageable.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm here with the amazing Dr Hildi Mitchell. How are you?
I'm good today, thank you.
Amazing. I'm really excited to have you on. I remember we had a chat, didn't we? We'd done the channel panel not long after, for you guys, and obviously it's something on my bucket list, and it was so amazing just to hear your inspiring story. And then we obviously got chatting again about your, being a head teacher, and obviously what I'm trying to do with the education system. And I'm excited to delve in. I mean, look, there's loads of things I want to chat to you today about. I obviously want to talk about the education system. The importance, I guess, really of like emotional literacy. That's something I really want to touch on in schools. I guess where and how do we start to change the system? That's something. Good leadership, I definitely want to jump into, and of course, channel swimming. Of course, so there's a few things I want to pick out about that. But a big question I just want to not to really answer now, but just I guess to think about is throughout the conversation. Hopefully, what we're going to try and navigate is. If we could redesign your education system from the ground up, what would it look like? I guess that's what I really want to try and get your take on and where we can go with it. But before we do dive in, as always, just want to in this season of life. How are you landing today? Where are you? How are you feeling? What's I guess Dr Hildi Mitchell. You all right, mate?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm good. I've swum this morning and I've taught this morning. So yeah, two things that usually set me up right for the day, really.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
yeah, been really nice. Yeah, beautiful sunrise as well this morning. Always makes my heart sing.
Thankfully, we were just talking offline, weren't we, about how the first couple of months of the year has been pretty wet and drizzly. So yeah, it was nice to, it is really nice to see that sun today, and the sea looks so calm today.
Oh, the little promise of summer that's coming.
It's nearly here. It's coming. It'd be an eternal optimist. I know that we're going to have an amazing summer. So I'm in with that. Well, look, thank you. I guess always I like to kick off with the big question, I think, that I ask everyone, which is what this podcast started with about success, right? But I'm keen with, especially with a lot of stuff that you've achieved and what you've done in your life. What does success mean to you, if you defined it?
It's a really interesting question, and I really like the way that you've kind of tried to pull it apart and look at it in different ways. I remember grappling with it when I'd handed my notice in as a head teacher, and I was kind of leaving that big bit of my life behind. And I thought, how do I define it? Have I been a successful head teacher? And I remember having a conversation with my head teacher coach at the time, and I was full of, I'm not a success. I have failed. I'm leaving head teaching. I'm leaving schools, at least for now. And I said I wanted to change so much, like I wanted to redesign the whole system, and there were barriers to it, and I didn't do that. And she reminded me that I had made a difference to all the kids that had come through my school. And that has stuck with me. The way for me success is, I think, is in the contacts that I've had and the influences that I've had with people. And sometimes it has been big things. I've done speeches in front of hundreds of people and things like that. When I was doing work for the National Association of Head Teachers, for example. But a lot of it is the kind of little moments, the little hearts you touch, Yeah. And I think those are the things that I'm probably proudest of as well. So that tells me that that's what success is for me, I think,
I love that. And it is sometimes, like you said, like, I think that society and the dictionary will have us believe that success is, though, like you said, you sit opposite me, someone has swum the channel, right? For example, like, wow, what a success and what an achievement that is. And yet you haven't reflected on that necessarily or mentioned that, because it's not always those gold medals, those achievements, those things that we the big showy things.
Yeah. It's interesting, when I swam the channel, after I swam it, I thought that when I got to French soil, I'd be like, it would be a big eureka type moment and fireworks, and dolphins gliding, but it wasn't like that at all. But what I felt after that was a real, just a feeling of feeling very complete and very calm. And I think it was like the completion of the kind of training and the goal. It was a quieter, calmer feeling than I expected it to be.
Yeah, wow. And I think there's lots of people who sit opposite me that mention, like, who have, I've had people who've got Olympic gold medals and Olympic silver medals, World Cup winners, and people like, and there's a similar thing today. Even people from a business point of view made millions, sold their business, made millions. Isn't it? That it's not that euphoria moment that we think it's going to be. Like, we set ourselves and our whole lives sometimes are geared up to these goals that we're going to try and achieve. And I think that's one of the things I'm trying to get into schools, and what with the whole reframing success and dealing with emotion, looking inward as opposed to the external thing. I really believe that's where, and it does. I'm really conscious. I don't think that means not to be ambitious or not to go and strive for them things, right? But there's a balance there, and if you put your self-worth, or you go, I'm going to be happy when I'll get to that point. Yeah.
I think you're going to be maybe disappointed like that, I think. And I think there is something about the success being in you, because you can't actually influence and change other people's perceptions. You can't, you're very limited in what you can do to act on the world. But what you can change is what your response is to it, and how you are with other people, and how you are to yourself, which is something I've definitely been learning in the last few years. So that's the thing that's really worth working on all the time, to be the best that you can be, the best version of yourself. And that, and then from that comes those relationships, and that's where you do have influence, and that's where you do have, you're able to change people then through influence and through connection and being open-hearted with them and being vulnerable, all those things that aren't always valued.
They're not, and I guess this is something this is why I was so excited to have you on, I think, because everything you've just said, 100%, and I think it's what we're part of the program that we're teaching in schools is along those lines, right? That's what we're trying to teach kids. And I know that when we spoke before, you sort of alluded to the fact that they were maybe some of the things that you were looking to implement at school. But what was that something you was able to influence as a head teacher? Because there's so many I guess barriers for you to be able to.
Yeah, there's barriers and there's structures. There's things like funding. There's the accountability framework for schools. There's sometimes just the very fabric of the school building can limit what you're able to do. Certainly, there's things like staffing, and I think I took those things with my team. I had a brilliant team. I've just been messaging one of them on the way here, and how are you doing? How is it in schools? And it's a hard job that they're still there doing. But I try to create a bit of space for those kind of things. So I know, trying to look at emotional literacy in schools and, developing that alongside the rest of the curriculum. And something that I realised quite early on into my headship was the importance of those things. I think I knew them, but I was able to put them into a curriculum framework. So I took over at my school almost 10 years ago, and it was an infant school. And I've worked in primary schools before, and working in infant school, you have a lens on the very young that I don't think you have in primary schools. And there are very few infant schools left, sadly, I think, because in an infant school, that early development is really prioritised. It's really well understood by staff. You have staff who have specialised in early years. And when I first arrived, we had this cohort that were in year 2, and they were quite challenging. So they were 7-year-olds, and they were quite challenging. And there was a kind of little group of boys with a kind of strange dynamic, but there was also some girls with something odd going on. They were gorgeous, lovely children. And I was new to the school, and the teachers sort of came to me and they said, these kids weren't like this before. It's come out of nowhere. They kept saying it's coming out of nowhere. I don't know why they're behaving like this. And I was new to the school, so I didn't know the children. And I was trying to find out a bit more about them. And I looked back at what had been going on for them earlier on in the data and all the information that we had. And quite a lot of those children had missed their prime areas in the early years curriculum. And one of the prime areas is personal and social development. And when I looked back, I was like, this has not come from nowhere. This is children for whom that bit of their development isn't there. It's not ready. And it really helped us to, as a school, sort of focus more on that. And it gave me credibility as well to kind of move school that way. I mean, we had COVID and everything in between, but that was such a light bulb moment. This behaviour doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from children whose developmental needs in that area haven't been met properly. So that was really,
Indeed, when because obviously there's loads of research. You look at Scandinavian countries; some of them don't start actual education until a bit later. I had a guy on here recently, a friend of mine called John Barnes, and he took his son to child-led schools. They lived in Costa Rica for a bit, lived in Portugal, done a lot of homeschooling, and he actually didn't start mainstream education until he was 12 years old, and yet he's got into mainstream education and absolutely flourished because he was given the opportunity, I guess, to to have that type of like the sort of thing that you're sort of mentioning, and it was there was those elements. So I guess part of the inquiry, I guess, is when do we start going down the academic route? Because we start quite early, don't we?
I think we start very early. And when you look at what we're expecting of our children, the kind of standards that we're expecting for children at the end of Key Stage 1, so when they are 7, around things like writing, are really, I won't say they're really too high. They are very specific. And when you look at children's development, even their physical development, another prime area, they are not really capable of holding pencils in the way that we're asking them to do that. You know, we are asking something that isn't really developmentally appropriate for our children. And maybe it's historic, maybe it's political, you know, I think what I keep banging on about, and I have done since the pandemic, is that to remind people that these standards that are set for children are arbitrary. Like they are not some kind of innate thing that children have to be able to write in a certain way by the time they're 7, or they know their multiplication tables by the time they're 10. You know, these are things that we as a society, somebody in society has decided we need to know. And these are our milestones. These are our benchmarks. But they're arbitrary. If you go to other cultures, you've mentioned Scandinavia, if you go to other cultures and other societies, they will value different things and they will be the milestones. So it's this idea that we have to kind of catch up, we have to rush through everything, I find that feels so wrong for me, for young children. You know, life isn't a race. Life should be rich and full, and we should enjoy every minute of it. You know, we shouldn't be, we're going to cut playtime short because we're going to practice our writing. That seems wrong. You know, children learn through play.
Okay, then amazing to hear that, right? And I can see, like, even the excitement and enthusiasm in your face. That you go, this is. But then, why? Surely we can learn from what's there at the moment, and we go, this is not working. Like, it's fundamentally not working. This is episode 142 that I'm recording, and I've probably asked every single person that's come on here about education in some form, like what their education was like, or and we've gone down that type of route, and there's not one person that has probably said to me, oh no, the education system's brilliant. Like, I think it's broken, and we all know that, and yet the government, or society, it doesn't change. So how can that be? What is it?
I don't know. I think it's probably lots of different factors in it. I think there is somebody or some group of people have a vested interest in the status quo. You know, change is always going to be difficult. Change is always going to be costly. Change is going to be challenging. I don't think we have a shared understanding of what education is for. I think that's one of the problems. I don't think we really share that understanding. When we came back to opening our schools fully after COVID, we were never shut. Cannot say that enough. We were never shut. When we came to opening fully after COVID, I really hoped that there would be a national debate about the purpose of education, because that laid bare some of the fictions. It became very clear very early on that my school, which was up till 7, which apparently is really important for getting the baseline, for doing phonics, for achieving our little milestones, apparently it's really important, even though in other parts of the world they don't even start their formal education. Very clear that what was really needed was childcare. Nobody really cared what we did with them for the first couple of months. They just wanted childcare. And I thought, well, why is no one debating this? Why aren't we going back and looking at it then? What is it we need from our education system? Because even the notion that an infant school is actually childcare doesn't really hold water when you look at how we structure it. We have our children being dropped off at 8:45, 9:00. That's really difficult for parents that have traditional hours of their work. Picked up at 3:00. In the first couple of weeks, they're picked up at lunchtime, and it's nonsense. And then they have to go to an after school club or they have activities. So that doesn't even work. We're doing a really bad job of childcare. And we're also doing a really bad job, I think, for our children for education. And when I go back to what I said about my year 2 boys and girls, but it was the boys that were causing the teachers to tear their hair out at the time, and how their behaviour didn't come from nowhere, their problematic behaviour, which was problematic for them as well as for the teachers. These things don't come from nowhere. And yes, the successive governments of either colour have pointed to rise in, literacy rates and, increased SAT scores for primary schools. They keep saying that we're getting better. But I keep wondering what the cost is going to be for our children, What is the cost? We're hearing now, for example, a slightly different thing, but it is related because it's one of the things I think makes school very difficult for some of our young people. We're hearing more and more about increased diagnosis of neurodiversity, whether that's autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, all the whole range of things that we have. What we're uncovering is it is much more diverse. Our society is much more diverse than people thought they were. So we've had people who are now saying, I was masking my whole time. I was keeping my real self, inside. I was just playing by the rules. If we've got all these children just playing by the rules, just trying to jump through the hoops, what is going to be the fallout, when they finally are able to be themselves? You take school uniform. So school uniform, schools say we have to have school uniform. It's one of the ways that we help sort of discipline and order our children. And it's also a way that we prepare them for the world of work. Now, you're at work. I've just come from work. Are either of us wearing a tie? Am I wearing high heels? Do I even have my hair done? I don't. I just got out of the pool. So that is a nonsense. That we don't need to prepare the children for those things. When I'm in my infant school, sometimes my junior school would say we need to prepare the children for the juniors. We need to prepare them for managing with less play. We need to prepare them for not going to the toilet when they want to go. And I was thinking, why are we just rolling down the expectations for children? Let's not prepare them. Let's let them live in the moment that they are,
Wow. There's so much to unpick. Because I think... with I guess focusing then on, because you mentioned there's a million things going through my head, so bear with me. But I think you mentioned about the cost there to some of the kids with the education we've got now, right? And I wonder what that, and just a lot of the stuff I'm obviously focusing on, I wonder how much that plays into mental health struggles later in life, right? Because I think what you're touching on there, and which you're bang on, actually probably because of the range of diversity, school probably suits 30% maybe of
maybe.
around that sort of figure. So you go, well, you've got this huge amount of kids that are just not fitting into that system, and because they're not fitting into that system, they're labelled as maybe not as clever or as intelligent as their peers, which makes them feel less than and a little bit inadequate, and then will play into just that they learn differently, and there's more evidence now to do that, and yet still things are not changing.
Still things are not changing, and those things are lifelong. And I'm interestingly, I hope he doesn't mind me saying so. I don't think he will, but I'm coaching someone who has a diagnosis of ADHD, an adult at the moment. And actually I coach quite a few people that have diagnosis of ADHD, so probably can't work out who he is. But I am coaching somebody, and the legacy that he has from being in school and being labelled naughty, not paying attention, difficult, is it's painful to, like, I can feel it off him. I can feel the pain when he gets something wrong, and I'm like, this is not supposed to be wrong. This is fun. I'm not testing you, and I can feel the decades of damage that's been done to him. Children, so many of our children, this is what's really worrying to me, so many of our children we can now see are not the right shape for our schools that we have. And yet we are still trying to change the children and not the schools. And that I don't think is right. We should be trying to change our schools. I can see little changes, and I see some brilliant people and brilliant things. Like doing more forest school is a way of introducing more play and more nature and more outside and more problem solving to children. But why does it need to be an add-on? Why isn't that an entitlement that children have outside time and that they have play all the time? Playtime is not something you earn and you lose if you're naughty. That is just so wrong. So there are good things going on in our schools, but the whole structure of it needs to change. I think I probably came to the way that I wanted to lead my school from my experience of parenting my children. I wanted my school to be the sort of school that I would send my children to, and that I would be happy to send my children to, because if it was good enough for my children, it was good enough for other people's children. And so I drew on some of the good practice of the schools they'd been to, some of the schools I'd worked at before. But one of the things that had happened just before I took up my headship was that my oldest daughter had stopped going to school, like completely. She was so traumatized by something in her life, and we still don't really understand it, that she didn't go to school. At the same time, my colleague who I was working with at the same time, her son also stopped going to school, had the same kind of problems. And I had a child that I was supporting in my school having the same kind of problems. So I was doing my job. It was like deputy head. It was quite a challenging job. And I had these 3 children who were quite significant in my life at the time, all of whom were struggling to just get to school. And they wanted to go to school. Their friends were at school. They were academic. They were clever. They had reasons to be at school. But getting out of the door, they would shake. They would cry. My daughter would just drop to the floor and just be like sobbing on the floor, unable to move. And I was just, it was in my face that schools are not safe places for some children. They are not safe, and they should be. They should be. As an adult, we can choose within reason. We have a certain amount of choice about where we work. And if we're really hating our job, we can change it. I mean, I ended up changing my job from being a head teacher. And I love where I work. I work at 2 places, both of which I love. And I've chosen both of them for slightly different reasons. I love working outside. So that's why I work at Sea Lanes. I love teaching and coaching. That's why I work at the swim school. And I have a choice about it. My kids and the other kids in my school, they don't have a choice about going to school, and some of them, their nervous systems are choosing for them. I can't go here. So I brought all of that kind of quite traumatic experience into my headship, and I made decisions that tried to make it a bit safer, a bit more welcoming, so we didn't have a uniform. We had a very flexible uniform, and I made it even more flexible. It was basically wear what you like. If you need to wear a uniform, because some kids do, here's the jumper. If you can't afford the jumper, mums and dads and grannies and people that you live with, you can just buy a badge and sew it on. The badge is £1.60 and you can buy the jumper anywhere. We created a culture of you come to school to be yourself and to learn through being, and you need to be comfortable. You need to be super comfortable to do this work. And it's really important. And I would do the same, because I'd be crawling around on the floor with the kids and outside and in a den and under the desk. And when I started my job, I was wearing like smart shoes and tights and a dress. And by the time I left, I was in, one of my memorable outfits was a kind of yellow chenille jumper and a dark denim dungarees. So I looked like an actual minion by the time I left.
I love it.
But, it was all about creating, in those kind of things, creating comfort. But there's a counter argument to something like uniform.
Was there pushback?
Yes.
From parents, from other teachers? Or what was
there
pushback?
was a lot of pushback, and that's what I was going to say. So, my sister is also a head teacher, interestingly, and my mum was a head teacher, and it was a bit of a family business, really. And she works in a very different area to kind of like, multicultural, Brighton, with quite a lot of kind of creative types things. She works in a village in Yorkshire. And she said to me once, she said, where I work, in the school that I run, I really need a uniform. It's something that really helps my children to feel comfortable. She said, there is so much pressure on them to wear certain things that actually emotionally it's quite damaging for them to kind of have that worry in their head when they come to school. She said, it's an equaliser in my school. And we had actually a kind of poverty proofing bit of research done in my school here in Brighton, and they said that my school, and there was another school, I think it's one very near us here, they buck the trend nationally, and they were to do with how we do it and the other narratives that are going on as well. So my sister said, for my school, I need uniform. For me, it raises aspirations, and my kids, she said, you're talking about people who might have choice about working where they don't have to wear a uniform. She said, in my community, I've got children coming from families where no one has ever had a job. I need them to wear uniform to think that they might have a job. So I'm really aware that there are different voices on it. I did get pushback from some of my families. I got pushback from my governors, from the local authority, from my school improvement partner, all of whom, because I brought in much more of a kind of play-based curriculum after COVID, based on the early years framework, but I rolled it through as much as I can into year 1 and year 2. And I had pushback from people saying, but your standards will fall. Your children won't be able to read and write when they leave. If they're just playing, where are they getting these things? Where is the rigor in the curriculum that you're offering? How are they going to learn everything? And I just had to believe in my vision and my staff team and my other school leaders and trust the process. And I felt sick sometimes thinking about it. But when I left, they weren't doing any worse than before. They were still doing as well in their reading and writing, and they were doing it more willingly. They would, instead of before you made them stay in and at playtime to finish a piece of writing. Now, when there was no playtime, they had just a really active, busy day. There was no playtime in the morning. They would just be writing. You would go in and they'd just be writing a book or something. They wanted to. They were motivated. They had purpose. They had a reason. They believed that what they wrote had value, and so they did write. But it took a little bit of, and that was my parents' worry, that somehow their kids would come out of my school not being able to do as much as the kids up the road, and it wasn't borne out in the data at all. So
that's what I was going to say. Like the outcomes of it, then, because this is again like a bugbear, Mark, but a challenge, I guess, that we're facing, and part of the problem is that the school system is set up to measure, right? You do a test, and you measure. Mine are 10 now. They're just doing their SATs, just getting ready to go to secondary school. They're doing SATs, and they do a test, and they have a success or failure based on that test result. Right? And you're like, how can? I'm a couple of things. One, why are we testing at that age? Right? What's the real purpose of trying to test, to see what level they are at based on this archaic system, right? But I'm keen to understand the outcome of those kids that did go in. As I alluded to earlier with my friend John, who his kid started at 12 and flourished, like he's doing his GCSEs now and flourishing, and he started mainstream education at 12. So I'm keen, like, what was the outcome of those?
Yeah,
kids?
they were all fine. So my school, I was waiting for Ofsted the whole time I was there. They never came. They came a few months after I left, and the current head phoned me when they'd come, and she said we got good, which is what we expected. And we had previously been outstanding, but we had been expected about 5 frameworks before, like the whole, not just the goalposts. I think the whole game had changed, So our standards were good, and they went on to the juniors again. The standards were good. So I think there is more than one way that you can have a very high expectation of learning than just kind of sitting them down and kind of like forcing into them. And I'm not saying all schools do that. Like I said, I think there's really good practice, because people who work with children day in, day out, they know that they've got to do this kind of thing. They do know that. I think what's lacking, and probably the biggest barrier in education, is resource, and so money. But what we need the money to buy, we really need to be able to do the kind of work we need to do with children, is we need people and we need time. And we need people because when you're growing little humans, you grow them by having connection with them, by guiding them, by being alongside them, co-regulating with them, by showing them, doing it together, exploring. So you need people. You can't grow humans without other people, without relationships. And then we need time, because children, anybody learning something new, needs repetition, needs time to make a mistake without fear, needs to be able to explore it in different ways to make sure it's really embedded. If we don't have time and we don't have people, then we are always going to be giving our kids a little bit of a raw deal, I think. And the problem is that both those things are super expensive. So that's what I think is the barrier.
My impression, I know I seem to, like, even some of the posts I put out and the conversations I have on here, and I talk about education, it seems like I'm bad mouth, but my teachers are superheroes in my part.
They absolutely are.
Amazing, right? And I go into the parents' evening and I talk to the teachers, and you can tell there is an element of, like, they almost say, don't want them to do sets, like we're not behind the set, but it's with something we've got to do. Like, it's a got to do thing because Ofsted and because of the structure that's in place, that they've got to follow that. And I understand it, but surely then the pushback has got to be that we all know it's wrong. Like, it's not working.
Yeah, I think there's loads of ways. There's loads of alternative ways that you could track progress in children, and there's so many different ways you could do it. The really sad thing about SATs is that I remember them being introduced, and they are really not about measuring children and children's progress. They are about measuring schools. So they are part of the accountability for schools framework. And for a long time, it's shifted. There has been a shift now, but for a long time, the SATs results were the limiting factor in what you could get in an Ofsted grading as a school. So they were so much about, is your school effective? And they did eventually, but to start with, they didn't even take really account of where children's starting points were, what had happened to the child's life story. And now children are getting stressed and crying and finding it really difficult in that SATs year. However hard teachers are trying not to put that on them, they know that that's going on. They've heard talk about it. They hear about it. Their parents worry about it because parents want their children to do well. We always want our children to do well. So, we try and prepare them. We try and help it be less painful. In the process, we're making it a big deal. And it really saddens me that our primary school children are subjected to this particular kind of accountability framework, because I don't think it's accountability. It's accountability for schools. It's not assessing progress of children. And we could have a much better system assessing progress of children.
What, because this is something like assessing is something I'm really keen to, because I spoke to, I think I might have shared with you when we met previously, but I asked the question to Dominic Mott, who's the head of Hurst College, and I said, why are we still so focused on measuring academic intelligence and not emotional literacy? Why is emotional intelligence, for me personally, believe that it should be higher than and focused on more than academic intelligence, because that, I think, will help to grow more healthier, rounded human beings, right? So why is that? And his answer to me was, I agree with you, it's not. And the reason is because we can measure academic intelligence and we can't emotional literacy.
I think, that's, that's a lot of educators think that's why the spelling, punctuation and grammar test was introduced, purely because it's easy to measure that. And it's a kind of proxy for good literacy. But that's what I mean. If we moved assessment of where children are away from accountability for schools, and we were genuinely interested in were they making progress, then we could measure them in any way we want. We could be asking about how happy they are at school. We could be giving them problems to solve. We could be getting them to work on a project for a week and observing them. Again, that takes time and it takes people, but we could decide that that's what's important. And that's what it comes back to, this thing about we've never really had a modern debate about what education is for. We keep talking about how we're educating children now for jobs that don't exist. Like, I'm talking about that since I started teaching 20 odd years ago. But we don't ask ourselves, so what do we want? There's no big national debate. As a parent, what do you want your children to get out of their education? Now, I will freely admit that my views on that have changed. In the 25 years since I've been a parent, they've changed. So when my children started school, I think I did want them to be academic. I did want them to get to get good results and to go to university. And because I had, and my husband had, and lots of people in our family had. That's what we did. That's
exactly.
That's how we measured it. That's what we were brought up to be. So I did want that for them. But then when I started going to parents' evenings, what I wanted to know really was, is she happy at school? Is she enjoying school? Has she got any friends? And she didn't have that many friends. It should have been a bit of a clue. But no, she did have some good friends, but there was often a lot of drama, and I wanted to know more about that. I wanted to know how to help her with those kind of things. And then as they went through school, I definitely became more concerned about her emotional state at school. And then when she got to this point where at kind of 12, 13, year 7 and 8, she just couldn't go anymore. At that point, we got to a point where she was so unwell mentally. Even she looked even physically unwell. I looked back at some old photos the other day and she was thin and ill looking and didn't leave the house and it was It was a horrible period of our life for all of us. But at that point, she wasn't going to school. My aspirations around education I was like, I don't even care about school. I don't even care about education. Bearing in mind I was a deputy head at this time. I don't even care. What I care about is she's alive. Because I can, if she's alive and I can reach her, I can support her and we will have time. Maybe she's not ready for it yet. And that has proven to be the case. It's absolutely proven to be the case. So she, through a lot of work that she's done herself, I'm very proud of my eldest daughter. I'm very proud of both my daughters, but I'm very proud of how Polly has turned her life absolutely around. That from a point of view where she was so agoraphobic she couldn't leave the house, that she's now doing a degree at Sussex University. She's getting firsts in everything. She's also holding down a job teaching swimming. She's lifeguarding. She, one of her jobs is parent and baby class. I mean, I didn't even know she liked babies. I'd never even been open to that idea. She opens up the pool. She does all the pool tests. She does all the technical stuff. So she's come this huge amount of journey, and she's also academic. She's getting first for everything. That has that is a case study for me in a child who needed something so different, and what she needed so much was time and patience and love, and that didn't stop her being academic. You know, she is still academic. She is still who she is. You know, she's an amazing author and poet, and also a brilliant teacher, and probably a very good teacher of SEN because she's experienced all of this. But she is also all these other things. And if you look at measuring progress, what if I recorded scales for anything when she was not going to school and she was not able to leave the house, and now compared to where she is now, she's made huge progress, massive progress, and we're not measuring those kind of things, are we? You know,
What was the for her not going to school? And what was the turning point for her to start to flourish? Was it just the fact that you able to create an environment to give her more time and stuff, or what was? Did you see that? Can you pinpoint like the change for her where you felt it?
She wanted to change. She felt that everyone else was kind of going on without her, and that was really difficult. And so that was a driver for her, but it was quite painful driver. It was like, I've got to catch up. You know, that was quite horrible. I think when she felt that driver, she kind of looked around for somewhere where she could feel that she belonged, and maybe she hadn't felt that at school. And she did some voluntary work at the swim school and was made, I mean, she started doing the voluntary work, and I said, please don't give her a job. It's too stressful for me. Like, it's going to be too hard. I didn't believe in her. I mean, I'm ashamed of that, but I didn't believe in her. And they said, no, we'll get her doing some stuff where we'll protect her. She won't be counted in the numbers of the adult child ratio. She'll be an extra. We'll protect her. And they did protect her. And because she was protected and safe, she was able to go and belong and to push herself and to feel safe there. You know, going back to my kids at school, feeling safe was so important. And she felt safe. She felt valued. And then all of a sudden she said, I've enrolled on my swimming teacher course, and blew everybody out of the water. She got 100% on all her theory, and the tutor and the assessor couldn't find anything to give her to work on in her final exam. They said it was absolutely brilliant. I was like, what? How? You know, and then she's gone on to teach and to teach some children who have really quite good, quite extreme support needs in the pool, some children with SEN, some children who are struggling at school, and like I said, the parents and babies. And she's really blossomed, but she found a place that she could feel safe, and for whatever reason she didn't feel safe at school. And I don't think it was for lack of trying. I think they tried within the system that they had, you know. But I think that, you said about leadership before, and who leads us. I've thought about this a lot, because her school, they tried so hard, but it was always like the pastoral team or the people on reception. They knew her and my husband very well, trying to get her in. I mean, they were lovely, but it wasn't really coming from the top. There wasn't, they were doing the pastoral stuff, but they weren't joining it up with like curriculum and timetabling and organisation. And then the other daughters have had she had a diagnosis of autism, actually, I think, at this point, but she found that she was finding things hard at school, and it was all going a bit pear-shaped until they got a new head teacher. And I can't actually talk about him without crying, because he was absolutely incredible, and he got her, and he saw her, and she knew that he saw her, and she knew that he cared about her, he connected with her, and he had very high expectations of her. And there was nowhere for her to hide, but it was all with love, She did her mocks in his office, because that was the only way they could get her in. And she'd done like 5 mocks or something, and he phoned me and he said, Hildi, I've got Elsie in my room doing these mocks. She said she's happy to stay and do all of the others, but it's like 3:30. I can't keep her. are you all right if she stays? He said, I do think if I let her out, she'll never come back to do them because, you know, he said, but I've given her some crisps and an apple and she seems all right. I said, yeah, if she says she's fine, keep her there. So she did all the mocks in one day in his office. And, but she came home and she said, it was so funny. I was just listening to him arguing with the council in the afternoon and doing this and doing, you know, he nurtured her. He gave her space. He made her feel safe. He made her feel valued at that school. And she blossomed and flourished once he arrived. And, you know, just, I think that the leadership that comes, there are good people in schools doing good things. There are good teachers. There are good Senkos. But it has to come from the head. It has to come in that place, realising that your school being inclusive for all your children and being somewhere they feel safe and valued comes from the decisions that you make, from how you are building connections, how you make them feel. I mean, this head, I won't mention the school, but this head, when he came in, they'd had a really bad Ofsted report, and he welcomed all the parents in and we talked to him, and he did it in a really good way, actually, where people really felt they could talk to him. And one of my questions for him, in fact, I think it was my only question, because I just trusted him. I said, has anyone talked to the children about this report? Because they've read these things in the report. They're all, you know, they're teenagers. They've read the report on Ofsted's site. Has anyone talked to them about what you're doing about it? Has anyone owned it with them? You know, they're reading that their school doesn't feel a safe place. You need to own it with them. And the next day, Elsie came home from school. She said, oh, the head teacher came into assembly today and talked about the Ofsted report. And I was like, this man has my backing. You know, it was about connection and all of that.
I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. But how do, because my impression, again, some of the teachers I've spoke with, and one of them obviously I'm working with, and I'm doing some work with the University of Sussex, so I'm speaking to them. My understanding is that teacher training in itself needs to be looked at. Some of the skills, so when they're coming out, they go in and actually have some real practical skills to focus more around emotional literacy and some of them. Because ultimately what you're saying is schools should have the ability to create safe spaces for people to come to create the safest environment for kids to flourish, not to learn to a degree, but to flourish as human beings. I think back to your point, right, earlier on, what is the system set up for? Is it set up to teach someone something so they can learn, or is it to just enable children to flourish as human beings?
So I don't think it's set up to help them flourish. I think it's set up to get them to be literate, numerate, as cheap as possible. That sounds so scathing, but I really believe it. I don't, and it's not joined up. So education budget is not joined up with like social care and, you know, the, I don't know, prison service or anything like that. But when we look at where our children go from schools, children who drop out of schools end up needing support for their whole life. They did some research, this was a long time ago, but I expect it's very similar. Research on prison populations, and they looked at people in prison there's such a high rate of people with undiagnosed speech and language and communication difficulties that have not had their needs met. if you were putting money into schools and into education, to developing people's speech, language, and communication, to helping those people to flourish, would they end up in prison? I don't know. But there's no joining up around the whole thing. And I feel like education is so often a political football where people just sort of score points. It's short term. So if I'm coming into government, I'm going to be here 4 or 5 years. I'm going to do what I can do in this time to be able to maximise votes. So I'm going to go for highly popular kind of policies. And half the voters don't have children. You know, we've got old people, we've got young people. They don't really care. They just want it to be cheap, you know. And people sometimes forget, you know, sometimes I hear people saying the most awful things. I don't have children. Why should I pay for education? Well, yes, you might not have children, but do you ever go to the doctor? Do you ever, you know, benefit from some research that's done? Do you benefit from town planning and, you know, transport? You know, like everyone benefits when our education system works. And if people are getting an academic education and also an emotional literacy, then they will do all of those jobs better, surely.
Of course,
won't they?
and something to even align with what you just said about even like with the prison system and stuff like that. And again, I guess for me, so much of it is always bringing it around to the mental health side of stuff, and looking at you know my mission to reduce the suicide rate. I fundamentally, wholeheartedly believe that the biggest impact we can have on that suicide rate is starting with kids and giving kids skills and tools to flourish and to understand their emotions, to process them, to articulate them, to be able to listen, to be able to talk about all of those things. If we create an environment where they feel safe to be able to do that and learn that, I really believe that will have the biggest impact on that suicide rate, because ultimately we all will face some form of adversity in our lives. Whatever happens, all them children that are going through the school system, they will face something. Even I only go from my own story of going, I was brought up, loved unconditionally. Beautiful parents, like, I love them to bits, but I still wasn't given those skills. So when I faced some adversity, I didn't know how to cope with that. I didn't know how to process that or even talk about it because of the arcade. And I think, what does it look like? I think just listening to you talk and highlighting the importance of how we can our important emotional literacy to get people to flourish. It's about lining up, like you said, it's about lining the dots. This is the problem. These are the problems. The solutions can start here if we can go back and...
I think if people really thought about it, you know, and were helped to understand those connections, people would be clamouring to put more money into education, especially early years education. You know, this would... I suppose the thing is, you put money in now for a kind of payout later. And that's sometimes, that's very hard, I think, for politicians to do. I would love to see education taken out of politics, you know, and maybe have a kind of, you know, an national education board that made decisions. And I certainly would love to see a proper national debate about what it's for, and hear from some children that are in the education system, hear from people that feel that they have succeeded in it and some that haven't. You know, I mean, I succeeded in the education system. I didn't like school, but I was very good at it. You know, I was very good at exams. I just used to cram for them and then like 87%. Oh, that's fine. That'll do. And I was also very good at knowing how to tailor what effort I put in. You know, I was very fortunate in that respect. I wouldn't think I was a gifted academic, but I was very fortunate. I remember doing a course once that I had to do for work. It was a master's level course and I really didn't have the time for it, but I had to do it. And I said, what's the pass mark? And they said, what do you mean, what's the pass mark? I said, what's the pass? What do I need to get? And they said, we need to get a B. I was like, okay. And they said, why did you ask that? And I said, because I'm going to put in a B level amount of effort. And they said, what? And all the people on the course were like, what do you mean you're going to put in a B amount of effort? I was like, because that's all I've got time for. Put in a B amount of effort, got a B. Because my natural inclination would be to try and get an A or A star. But I was like, I haven't got time for that. I need to know what the pass mark is, and then I'm going to put that effort in. But that's really unusual to be somebody that's so good at the system. But I was good at the system. I still want to dismantle it. I don't think it's good for everybody.
This is why I love. That's what I mean. That's why I was so inspired and so excited that when a couple of conversations we've had around it, and I was like, exactly what you said. Right? You are a product of the system that works. I can go and fit in that system, and it works, and then I'll come out the other side, and I've flourished, and I've become a head teacher, etc., etc. You've gone on that path, the path that you chose to take. Right? Yeah. Whereas how many don't know what that path is and don't understand that? So, and the fact that you've done that and you've been in it and you've lived and breathed it, and you're still sitting here with me today, going, we need to dismantle it.
We need to change it.
All right, let me put this on you then. Me and you are going to go up to Parliament tomorrow, and we're going to set up this education forum, like you said, and we're going to say, how do we drive it? What do we start with? Where do we start to change this?
Well, I would start. I mean, my expertise is in primary and in early years, so I don't think anyone would listen to me about secondary, and it's kind of, my ideas are less developed, but I would look at where do children most flourish? They flourish in a loving home with a lot of attention and a lot of care and a lot of love, and with space to explore. And I would like our education system to reflect that, in the early years in particular, to reflect that more.
Up to what age?
Maybe like 10.
So before they go, so up to year 6.
Yeah, maybe up to year 6. Maybe up to that age. Maybe we have like a middle school system and we have like an in-between bit, and then they do secondary. But for me, when I look at what are the features of those things? They are small environments, not overwhelming environments, with a lot of adults to help you do stuff when you're little and to guide you. So I would want to see schools redesigned. At the moment, I mean, it's tragic. In Brighton and Hove, we're closing schools because we have we don't have enough pupils in them, because the figures don't work. And so many people are looking at that going, but wouldn't this be an opportunity to have smaller class sizes, to have smaller groups, And it's just that the numbers don't work. So if you could make the numbers work, we have space in our city to have small schools and to have small classes. And then you could have more adult-child interaction. And then, so that's my first thing. It would be, everything would be smaller. You wouldn't have these huge schools, or if you did, they'd be divided into small little kind of home kind of feeling places. I would have every child should have an entitlement to play and to being outside.
So giving kids more autonomy. Much
more autonomy.
Really?
Children will, but think about, even as an adult, having autonomy to do something means you explore something sometimes in loads more depth than you would. You kind of go down a little rabbit hole of something you're fascinated by. And if you want children to learn something that is a transferable skill, like writing, for example, if they really motivated to write, then they will write. Because they want to, they need to. So if you give them those real contexts in which to do it, they will want to learn. And if you've got the adults there, they'll come to you, they'll beg you to teach them to write. They'll beg you to teach them to read so that they can look something up. But they also need to be developing their problem solving and creativity, because that is also a skill that underpins everything. And with our world changing so fast, they absolutely need that. That's become like another real prime area, I think. So they need time, they need stimulus, they need things that can be exciting there for them to do. And then I think I would like to see, what I wanted to see after COVID was, instead of money being spent on tutors and catch up to this, just kind of like plucked out of the air place where we're all supposed to be. Like the whole world was catching up. Who were we catching up to? Like, mad. That was the maddest thing I ever heard. Instead of that, why aren't we funding adult education? Why aren't we funding libraries? Why aren't we letting people continue their education post 18 for free? Why are we charging them something, I don't know, like 90 grand to get a degree? You know, let's put our money in there. Why is there a cap on it? Why are you sort of finished when you're in your early 20s? You know, I went and did my lifeguarding qualification in my 50s and my beach lifeguard qualification, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I really thought I was too old for it. And I now teach lifeguards. And I didn't start doing that till I was in my 50s. And I've loved it, and I've loved learning, and I've always learned things. I'm learning Charleston dancing. I mean, I've got 2 left feet. But why do we stop learning? And why do we stop playing as well? You know, we as adults, we're all so serious and, oh, we've got to pay the bills and we've got to go to work. And, you know, where's the fun? Why are we alive if we're not playing and we're not having fun? I've invented a new game today. Well, not today. I invented it a while ago. So I'm doing channel training. And this time of year can get really dull. We've done the winter. We've done the winter Sea Lanes Winter Sea Challenge, swim challenge. And now it's like hard. We can't go in the sea yet. It's a bit boring. So I've made up this game that involves like playing cards, and we're playing this virtual game, me and all these people that are channel training, and we've got our little targets, and we get cards and we discard cards, and we have a little leaderboard. And I'm like, why? Like, who says that it has to be boring? Who says it has to just be on a spreadsheet? Why can't we, you know, play?
I love it.
I'm always coming up with a game for something.
But it's amazing, right? Because there's so much. I remember Leon Taylor sat opposite me, and he said, he was Olympic silver medalist diver, and he said, I think it was George Bernard Shaw said the quote something like, "We don't grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. We don't stop playing because we grow old." Something like that. Yeah, along them lines. And I just like, it's so true.
It's so true. Well, you should laugh. When I was I've had really stressful periods in my life, and you know, especially, you know, I talked a bit about bringing up my daughters, and it was that was hard, really hard. And I saw some low places myself, like really horrible. And I remember going to like, well, how do I feel better? You know, and reading books about like closing the stress cycle and things like that. And it was, you know, you should move. And I was like, well, I am moving. It's not enough. You should move. You should laugh. You should listen to music. You should sing. All these things. Why are we should be doing that? Our lives should be saturated with those things. Then we would be happy. But they're not. They're saturated with pressure and with not feeling good enough. And why are we? But I guess I come back to children. If as adults, the things that make us feel really low and that are really damaging and that do cost people their lives, if those things are pressure and feeling inadequate and feeling like nobody cares and like you don't have any worth, why are we putting that onto kids? That's horrific. Why am I instead? Instead we should look at childhood. We should embrace it. We should nurture it. We should protect it. And we should bring the joys of childhood into adulthood.
Oh, I love that.
That's what we should do. Why am I not in charge?
I'm voting for you. Prime Minister. Go.
But it was too hard. And that, you know, I tried really hard to bring these things into my school and to my practice as a head teacher, into the way that I led my school. And in the end, I had to step away because there were so many barriers and it was so difficult that I had to protect my own health and well-being and step away from it. And to leave that did make me feel like a failure. And I had to revisit how I felt and how I measured success a lot. But I think I left a bit of a legacy at that school. And I certainly, you know, there are people I know that do share those values and share that vision for how schools can be, and they are still in schools and they are still doing that work. And I think the more that people like you can support them from outside education and can kind of just shine a light on what it could be, the more things could change. And if they don't change for everybody, at least they can change for those kids in their class or in their school. That's, it's like the story of the starfish, where someone's going, do you know the starfish?
Yeah.
And they say, well, I didn't save all the starfish, but you made a difference to that one. Maybe in education, it's too overwhelming and it's too difficult to think we can change it for all the starfish in our schools. But if we can change it for some of the starfish, it's worth it for those.
100%. 100%. I'm so adamant, and I did. There's times I'm having these conversations, and I sit there, and my own self-doubt and things kick in, and you go like, "This is too big for me." Like the whole mission is too big, and then you go, and then I'll get, I look at some of the stuff the kids vote in that first program we did, or I'll get a DM on social media from someone that said they listened and it resonated with them, and it made you go, actually, if we can just change our little corner of the world, maybe then that creates a ripple that has, and if it doesn't, and all I do is just help one person or one group of kids, or then maybe that's enough.
It's worth it. I mean, I, like you, I assume, I've lost people to suicide, people that I love, and when I think about that, if I'd been able to change something for that person, it would have been worth anything. So anything we can do to make life better for a person is worth doing for a person. And I think the vision though, you're right to have a big vision. We should have a big vision, because the big vision, the big dream is strong. And it lights the way, and it pulls us, it drags us in the right direction. And even if we never quite get there, going in that direction, we're able to do the little bits. So I think a big dream is a good thing, even if it sometimes feels like too much.
You know what? I remember I had Bruno sit opposite me, who was Brighton captain, and he talked about, I played football my life, and it's my love, and I never made it, but I loved playing. But he said he wanted to be a professional footballer from when he was 10. He said to his dad, I'm going to be a professional footballer. And he said, I'm going to be the best player in the world. So his dream was to be the best footballer in the world. He said, if you said maybe Maradona, Lionel Messi, those were the best footballers in the world. He said, did I achieve that? No, but I did. I set my goals there. And I did have a career as a professional footballer for 20 years.
And he was one of the best Brighton players.
He was a great player, right? He was a great player. What a legend. So you go, but I love exactly what you've just said really resonated, because that made me think of that, because he goes, I set my, and that's what we want for the kids. I set dream big. I hope my thing for the kids. Dream big. Dream it.
I did for a while. I did when I was working in SEN, when I was a Senko. I did some stuff where I had some training in person-centered planning tools, and so we used like graphic recording sort of systems. Systems isn't the right word, but ways of tools. And we tried to capture the dreams and the visions and the voices of children with SEND. Instead of just like asking them this boring questionnaire. So we kind of like get their, they bring their family and they bring their friends. Somebody brought their dog once, and we would do this kind of like create this bit of art together about what their dreams were. And making these dreams, like encouraging them to dream when these are kids with disabilities, with loads of barriers, was like the most amazing thing. To sort of encourage them and not, what did they say to us? Never try and manage expectations. You have to dream big as a person. The expectations will manage themselves. I mean, there'll be enough barriers coming. At that point, you grow the dream, you flesh it out, you put some detail in it. And I guess that's what Bruno's talking about. You have the dream that is your star, isn't it? Your North Star.
Yeah, it's something else I want to touch on what you mentioned there, and I guess it leads into the stuff around success for me, and the question we asked. Like, one of the things we're going into the school trying to reframe success, because when we ask these year 6, so these 10-year-olds, when we say success, what's the words that come to mind? And for a lot of them, you can imagine the words they wrote down were rich, were famous, was money. Those were the type of things that were coming out. You ask them who was a successful person, and they look at you know, you mentioned Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and those type of people. You go, at 10 years old, they're identifying that's what it means to be successful. If I'm a success, that's it. And then you throw sats into that, and you're going to be measured on your success based on that. Was one thing that you highlighted a little while ago around being enough, right? The reason, you know, if we talk about mental health or suicide, we say that actually a lot of time people feel their self-worth or they're not enough, right? Like, how can we not, or why are we not focusing more on just giving kids the message that the two things that we've just mentioned, right? One, that they're enough just as they are, by being them, they're enough. But also at the same time to let their imaginations go and dream as big as they want to be. But their self-worth is not based on that success.
Yeah. I think trying to marry those two together, I think is a challenge, isn't it? You know, like, because that's where your self-esteem is kind of exists, doesn't it? In the gap between where you are and where you want to be. So I think, a lot of work on the you are enough is where it's at, really. And I think, you know, one of the small things that we do in schools that undermines that is there's this big move of like giving children constant feedback and like, you know, so you did this but you could do it better next time like this. And I used to kind of like try and kind of like go against that sometimes in my school. And a few times I've said to my teachers, yes, we want them to know how to improve, but just remember, just put yourself in their shoes. They've bought you something that they're really proud of, and you tell them how that could be better. How would that feel? Sometimes you have to celebrate it. Sometimes it's enough to say, do you love it? Then I love it. But it's hard when everyone else, you go to a conference and it's all about feedback, and I'm going, my kids need to hear that they are good. We need to value them. So if a kid comes to you and says, look at this thing I've made, look at this model, or look at this play that we've done, or do you want to hear this song I've written? And my kids used to come to me all the time that I never got any work done. I used to be at school till 10 o'clock at night because I was never doing any work. I was always with the kids. And they would come and they'd say, like, do you want to see it? And I'd be like, yeah. And instead of giving them feedback, I started saying to them, do you love it? Are you proud of that? And they'd say yes. And sometimes if they'd done a shoddy job, because sometimes they would just want to come and see me and they'd do any old rubbish to come and see me. And they would go, oh, I think I could do it better. And I say, I would love to see it when you've done it as best as you can. And then they'd go off and they'd come back. So kids can criticize themselves. They know that. And maybe that's a helpful kind of thing to think about in this gap between the kind of goal or the dream and the where I am, you know, to put it back on them instead of us telling them. Because actually, if we talk about emotional literacy, that's a really key skill. To know yourself when it's good enough. If you rely on other people telling you, then you're going to mishear that message as well. You're going to be looking to outside measures. You know, you're going to be looking on Instagram, or you're going to be looking at the influencers, or you're going to be looking at the people down the road who've got a nicer car, or I'm going to be looking at my sister with her Arga. You know, if you're looking outside things, you're going to be measuring by that. But if we put it back onto kids at an early age, are you proud of that? Then they know. And then they know. And then they know that you trust them as well. And then they're developing their own sense of self, their own sense of worth. Yes, I am proud of that. What an amazing thing for a child to say, to know.
That's so... because it's exactly that, right? It's that... and I've said this a few times. We are often, as adults, we spend our lives looking externally, and yet we get to potentially, so I did midlife crisis awakening, wherever we land on that. But we get to those points in midlife where we start to look inward and we ask some big questions to ourselves. Who am I? What are my values? What do I hope to? All of them, but it's inward as opposed to that external thing. And my big thing, my big thing is how early can we teach kids that to just look inward, intrinsic success and ask those questions. I'm not saying I want to ask 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, who am I, or stuff like that, but we can, and not even maybe to the degree of going, what are my values as a person at that age, of course, but potentially identifying some behaviours that they want to exhibit, kindness, curiosity, those type of things. And then that's where the value of that person, because I believe we get so wrapped up in identity and asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, how did they? My wife was probably the only one I ever knew that when at 11 years old, I want to be a solicitor, and went on to be a solicitor. Like, I wanted to be a footballer, like a million other young lads. Right? Didn't become a footballer, like a million other young lads. I had no idea. Still at 47, I'm going, what am I going to do?
Well, I'm older than you, and I'm still not sure.
but we do, but that's the beauty of life, isn't it? Exploring that curiosity and trying to find
what if, and I think you can start that when they're young, when they're really young. I think asking children what they want to be when they're older is the wrong question. I think helping them see who they are now is more helpful and more fun. Going back to being fun, what makes you happy? Yeah. What do you enjoy? How do you feel when you do that? Those are questions about your internal state. They're about your being. Those things, to grow an awareness of those things, I think is really healthy. And honestly, I wish that I had understood those things better as when I was a parent. Well, when I am still a parent, but when I was a parent of young children, I think I would have done a better job. There were some things that I learned along the way that kind of led me in that direction. So my kids used to swim, obviously, and I used to, it's terrible. I was a terrible parent. I used to, worry about their times and things like that. Polly was, trying to get county times and regional times. She was some in the top 10 best times for breaststroke and butterfly in the country. She was a brilliant swimmer. And I realised, I did used to talk to her about how well she'd swum, how fast she'd swum, and how many races she'd won. And I think I read somewhere, or I saw someone talking about how a better way to approach watching your kid do sport is to tell them that you've enjoyed watching them, and to go down that route. Like, I enjoyed watching you today. How did you feel when you were swimming? And I did make that shift towards the end of hers, but I don't think it was early enough. And I think I did her a disservice, but I didn't know better. And with my younger daughter, I definitely approached her swimming and watching her swimming more like that. And that's, if I'm ever a grandparent, I'm going to be all about that.
But again, so much of it comes from our own learned behaviours, and I always, with parenting, there's no rule book, and I fuck up every day, and I go, but we try and do the best we can with what we've got at that time, right? Yeah. And I think that's all, as human beings we can only do, but certainly as parents. And I think there's sometimes some people listening, maybe there'll be pushback, and people will go, no, if you want them to, for example, if someone wants to be the best and wants to become an Olympic champion, you're going to have to work on. Sometimes they need that push in that direction, maybe to get them to achieve, like the greatest people who have achieved the greatest athletes and stuff in the world. Were they pushed that much to do it?
I think the jury's out on that, and I think we're going to come to look at that question differently. Actually, there was one of the ice skaters in the Winter Olympics I managed not to watch any of, but my kids were watching it. Didn't she retire at like 18 or something because of the pressure? And she was being told, you must do it like this. And she was under pressure from her coaches and her parents. She retired and she came back in this Olympics. I think she was Canadian or American, can't remember. And she came back on her own terms and won a medal. And I wonder whether our greater understanding, our better understanding of mental health and of, trauma on, and adverse child experiences, which, some of the previous coaching sort of methods do definitely border on kind of traumatizing and abusive young people. I wonder whether we'll come to realise and recognise that you can achieve on those kind of terms as well. I think that's quite an exciting thing. And certainly, my kids have kind of noticed that about this young woman. Elsie did also notice that most of the medalists are like her age. But she's okay in herself. She's all right.
Yes. But you're so... Because I remember listening to a podcast with Thierry Henry, the Arsenal player, and he said apparently his dad, when he was born, picked him up and he said to the family, he's going to be one of the best footballers in the world. Like when he was born. Right?
Like the Lion King.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, right. So you go like, the pressure, but he talks, and he really openly talks about his mental health struggles and in relationship with his dad. But like that pressure from such a young age, you just go like there was no other direction for him to go then, was there? It was got to be that you've got to be best enough. You're right. Wouldn't it be amazing to just allow kids to fly? I look at like my two, obviously being a big football fan. One of them has got into football. She loves it, and she's not the best player in the team, but she comes off every day with a smile, and I'm like, and she's always trying to please me, and I'm like, listen, are you still enjoying it? Great. If you said the second you stop enjoying it, I'll take you every day if you want to go. As soon as you don't want to go. And my other one, Lucy, she just hasn't found it. Well, we thought she hasn't found the thing that she has found is horse riding. Oh, great.
That's
so
nice.
I'm like, yeah,
that's expensive.
nice and expensive. I was like that. You could have just picked running or athletics. But she, we took her on Saturday for her first lesson. She's had a couple of like birthday party, and honestly, and she sometimes struggles in school. She's been struggling in school a little bit, but she got up on Saturday and the excitement in her face. And when you just go, whatever I find the money, do you know what I mean? Whatever it costs, you just go, because just that, all I want for them, and I say this all the time, all I want is just for them to do things that light them up. And I think if we can encourage that in our kids as much as possible, like, even from my point, I go like from work, like you mentioned about the stuff, like your work, you love it. We've chosen them things.
We've chosen, right? Yeah.
And I understand that I'm quite fortunate in that as well. The things I've chosen, I love to do. And that's not always the case for some people. Some people need to go and do 2 jobs to just pay the bills, and they can't get into the thing that it's easy to go, just want to follow your heart and do what you love. But there is something in that. And the more we can encourage that.
Yeah, or at least to make a place for the things you love. I've talked to my girls because they're both doing swimming, teaching and things, and but they both. Polly wants to write. She's doing this creative writing degree, and Elsie wants to act, and she's in the kind of like applying to drama school type kind of period of her life, which she might be in for a while, maybe, I don't know. But they both got this very creative side to them, and. We've had lots of conversations, where does it fit? For some people that creativity becomes part of their work, and they're really fortunate that their work is like that. For others, it's quite important to them that it's separate, and they work and then they do that thing as well. And there are lots of ways in which you can construct your life to give you the things you need. So instead of looking for what will be a good job for me, what will I need in my life and how can I construct that, I think is again a more kind of practical way to do it maybe. And then I look at Elsie and, she wants to go into acting, but she's doing this teaching and she's blossoming, teaching some children who have really quite high support needs in terms of their sort of special educational needs. And she's loving it. She said to me, I've submitted my form for my availability for the intensives. Can you make sure Jade knows I want to work with the SEN children? Like that's lighting her up. Yeah. And she only really went into that just to get a bit of money, but it's lighting her. So, I think she approaches it very creatively. She plays these very dramatic games. It's like doing a drama workshop in her class, I think. But I think, we perhaps sometimes ask ourselves the wrong questions, and instead of asking ourselves, what do I need to be successful, in terms of a job, what do I need in my life will help us to be successful, because it encompasses the internals, doesn't it? And the need for rest and the need for companionship and, different environments and light. I didn't know how much I need light. I need light. And I've I missed that when I was working in school. I hardly saw any light in the winter at all, and now I do, and that has made a big difference. So certainly with my kids, I want them to think about what they need and then try and build a life that will meet their needs.
There's a couple of things as we're coming to a couple of things I want to touch on. I'm just thinking for the parents listening, all the stuff that we're sort of talking about, because one of the things that I'm trying to really engage with is that not only do we're trying to work with the University of Sussex so we can go and help teachers in teacher training to give them maybe some information around emotionally how they can develop that bring it into their school curriculum when they go in and into their teaching. And then obviously we want to teach the kids around emotional literacy. That's part of the programme. That's what we're delivering. But the third part of it is obviously to parents and trying to give, again, back to our own skills that I was brought up like, and trying to look at how we engage parents. What would you say to parents that are listening maybe that from your learnings, and what parents can do to help with that? Create that environment, because it's great teaching the kids this emotional literacy, but if they're going home to an environment that doesn't have those skills.
I actually learned a lot from my kids, and they had some really good education, and Brighton and Hove did a lot of good work around personal, social and health education. When my kids were at school, and they would come back, and I was teaching it, so I knew the curriculum, and they would kind of come back and they'd be parroting it to me, and I'd be like, yes, this is great. They do listen, and they do get it. So I think parents should listen to their children. I mean, I think parents should listen to their children in general a lot more than they do, really, because they will tell you what they need. And if we want our children to feel they have value, we need to value what they say as well. So I would say that's one of my bits of advice: listen to your kids. And then I think also reflect on the things that made you happy as a child. What did you love as a child? And try and find space for that in their upbringing. You know, I see a lot of very busy children after school and at weekends, and part of it is the childcare problem. Part of it is the kind of keeping up, catching up, that we kind of absorb, and it's just what we do, and that's how we bring our children up these days. But when I think back to my childhood, some of my best days were just going out. We used to have this field behind our house that was earmarked for building, but then I don't know if the planning permission was slow coming through or someone ran out of money, but then nobody ever built on it for ages, my whole childhood. And we used to call it the Muddy Mountains. I hadn't even thought about the Muddy Mountains for ages. And they was like right outside our house, at the back of our house. And it was just this kind of like half bulldozed field. And it was brilliant for cycling and building dens and hiding and just hanging out. And we were just like out there the whole time. And so I remember having a lot of freedom as being something that made me happy as a child. We used to go on our bikes. I mean, the world is a bit different, and maybe, think about it. But what made you tick? What did you love? When you look back, what are you nostalgic for? And maybe try and put that into your childhood, your children's lives. Because if you did okay, you trust that your kids will probably do okay. I mean, you're their parent, and they're your genetic offspring, if they're your own biological children. And if they're not, you're still their parents. You're bringing them up. You're creating the environment. So I think, mind your own experience. What gave you joy, and give that to your children.
Brilliant message.
My children be listening to this going, we never did any of that. But I did, I would admit, I was not a good parent. I was not a good parent when I was a young parent. I was kind of very thrown by it. And I think I have become a better parent as I've got older. And I think I am a fantastic parent of teenagers now.
Love that. Look, a couple of things that we spoke about when you mentioned about when you come out of education, and you said you questioned whether it was a success or failure. I know we sort of touched on COVID and obviously some, maybe some of the challenges that you face within the school then, but if I can, I want to read a letter that you wrote to the kids. I got this letter.
forgot about
I was blown away when I read it, and I think that if we're measuring success for you as what you and the impact that maybe you had on them children, I think this maybe might sum up. So let me read this. Dear children, I'm writing this to you all because some of you have already had to miss school because of the COVID-19 virus that is spreading around, and your parents and carers have had to keep you at a home as part of keeping everyone safe. For very many of the rest of you, tomorrow will be the last day at school for a long time. When you come back, lots of things will have changed. It won't be spring anymore. You might come back in the next year group. There might be new teachers and new friends to get to know, but lots and lots of things won't change. Your school grown-ups will carry on thinking about you every single day. We will laugh at the funny things that you have done, and we will wonder if you are still getting better at your handwriting and what you are reading now. We will all hope you are doing the very important job that you have been given to help stop the spread of COVID-19 and washing your hands. We'll carry on planning learning activities for you to do, and we are in the middle of setting up a way for you to carry on sharing your learning journey with us. We will always love you, even though we won't be able to see you every day for a while. I want to tell you some important things. Don't be frightened. You may hear some things that you are worried about, but these are not worries for you. Tell someone you trust about your worry and let them look after it for you. The children who are going to be coming back to school are not more special than you. We are going to be looking after them for a while because their parents can't, because they are doing some particularly important jobs right now. There are so many good things happening in amongst the bad things. There is less air travel, and as a result, the environment is getting a bit of rest. And who knows, maybe we can work out new and better ways of doing things in the future, because we have to. People are talking to each other and offering to help each other more. This is a very good thing. Make sure you do that too. Even though you will be missing some school, you can still learn and try and be the best at everything you do. You are a very special bunch of people. Tomorrow we'll say goodbye to each other for a while, but please keep singing, playing, making, drawing, writing, problem solving, and learning about our amazing world. We are having an adventure, and like all real adventures, we have to be brave. Lots of love, Dr. Mitchell.
That's...
What?
I remember writing that, and I just remember my big worry was that the children who didn't come to school during the key workers call would think that we didn't want them, that they didn't belong. And I was so worried that they would think that. And that's why I wrote that letter. Because we did want them, we wanted them all. And I know some of them had a really hard time. And we went and we visited and sat in their gardens, and my teachers went and kind of sat on walls, and I took them to the park on Boxing Day. There was a complicated family, and I related things happening, and I took one of their children to the park, and but that was what I wanted my school to be somewhere where you did feel loved. And I don't think we use the word love in education enough, but children are loved at school, and they should be.
When I read it, the reason I put it out, because I actually got a bit emotional reading it when I printed it out, and I just listened to you talk, and I was, again, back to the reason I was so excited and inspired to have you on, and I just think back to what we were saying earlier about maybe we can't change the education system, maybe we can't change the world, but actually I think if you ever question how successful you had been as a head teacher, just read that there again, because I'm telling you, I'm listening to you speak, or go back and listen to this episode, because just listening to how you articulate stuff and your whole approach to it, without a shadow of a doubt, the impact you would have had on them children, that for me is success and true leadership. So you're
Thank you for reminding me that.
well, it was.
This is why you're very good at your job.
Listen, but yeah, it was just beautiful, and thank you. You've like I said, you've had a huge impact on me, and I think we will. I think I'll listen, and I'll put this out there, and I know that it will start to hopefully a lot of the questions that we've discussed, and a lot of the questions we've asked back, and we maybe get people to think about it in a different way, and hopefully maybe some educators, maybe some people in power might even listen, and we can start to make that small impact. But if that doesn't happen, at least we can just do some of the stuff in a small way, and maybe. And I'd like to think that if I can go into the schools and maybe have a small impact as much as you have on them, then I'll deem that as a success as well.
I think that will be a success. And if you ever want anyone to come to Westminster, I'm always happy to go to Westminster.
Tell you what, I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to hold you to that. Well, look, as we're coming to the thing we hadn't talked about, which I was going to go into a little bit more, but I do want to just the channel swim. Right? I do want to just touch on that. I just want to ask you one question, really. I guess what did you learn about yourself after that channel swim?
That's a killer question. What did I learn about myself? I learned. I don't know. I learned. Okay, I think I came to know myself in ways that I didn't know myself before. I think I went into. I had to go into places in my brain and my body that I hadn't really explored before. There were some things I knew before. I knew that I could be disciplined. I knew that I could withstand discomfort. And I knew that I could follow up to a goal. Like I knew that I could kind of trust the process and things. I think what I learned one of the things I learned that surprised me, because the things I've just talked about that I knew were all about me and what I had as capacity. And I think I am someone, partly the way I was brought up, I think I've always been quite confident, and I've always assumed I had the capacity to do whatever I want to do. You know, I'm very privileged from that point of view, very privileged. But I think what I learned was something about the team around me, and something around asking for help or letting people help. So you have to have a crew that are going to do all the kind of feeding and the looking after you on the day. And I had a really good team on the day. I had a friend of mine and my husband, and then another chap that I'd met through the channel swimming community. And you have to kind of put yourself in their hands and the hands of your pilot. My pilot, Simon and Maz, they're the best on high hopes. Giving yourself over to other people was the thing I didn't really understand I had to do, and I hadn't really experienced, and I hadn't really experienced it as an adult. I don't remember even experiencing it as a child. I was quite an independent child. There was things going on at home that meant I was quite independent from quite a young age. And yeah, that was the thing, learning what it felt like to be supported. And I hope that is slightly influenced both how I kind of support my own resources going forward. Like I do ask for help, I think, a bit more, but also to kind of understand that in my relation to other people as well. And I think I am somebody that does want to help and does want to look after other people, but it's sort of shone a light on that, I think.
Love that. And there's so much in that. For me, that's one of my biggest learnings the last few years is exactly that. Like, similar to you, really independent, and want to help other people and stuff, but asking for help myself was always, and it's the biggest shift for me. Like, this has been the biggest transition of my life really last year, and all the stuff that's happened personally and where I am in business and stuff. But the biggest change was putting my hand up and going, I need some help. Like, can people, and there was shame around that for me and like from old narratives, but actually I really resonate with that, because I think if we can again change the narrative around that, it's a strength and it's brave asking for help, and we need it. We need people around us. It's
so brave, and it's so difficult for most people, isn't it? And I hope people kind of really notice that, you know, something that looks like a very individual thing to swim the channel. Yes, I did the swimming, but on the day, all I did was the swimming. Everybody else did everything else.
Yeah.
You know, when you swim the channel on solo, they don't even let you carry your bag to the boat. Like,
I love that.
you know, so it's, and I think that it's a bit of a lesson in sort of humility as well, that you can't do it alone.
Love that. Final question before we do our closing tradition. If a head teacher is listening and feels a bit stuck right now, what would you say?
If a head teacher's listening and feels stuck, I think it's time to get back in touch with your why. You might be stuck on the what to do, but if you can remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing, it will help you. It will guide you, and it might guide you to doing things differently, or asking for help, or stepping away, or stepping for a break. But I think that why is so important. For me, being a head teacher was about leadership, but it was also a leadership that was embedded in service. And maybe that's why leading through the pandemic, actually, it was hard, but it felt like a privilege. Because we should serve the communities that we work in. And I think to reconnect with that is a really helpful thing when you're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Amazing. Got a closing tradition on this podcast. This is our storytelling cards.
Okay.
So I'm going to invite you to one of our top table events. You'll love them. But so I need you to choose a card, any card, pass it back to me.
Oh. Do I look?
No, I'll read it out to you. Okay. What activity makes you lose track of time?
Oh, swimming.
That was an easy one, wasn't it?
That was so easy.
It's almost had your name on that one. Name on that one.
It did. Psychic.
Same as me, but brilliant. Hildi, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been, like I said, from meeting you when we've done the channel panel talk, and then having the privilege again sitting opposite you and having a chat at Sea Lanes recently. I'm so glad we did reconnect, because this was the amazing conversation I knew it would be. So I'm so grateful, and it just aligned so much with my mission and what. And I was so curious about lots of different things, and you've helped me unlock and actually realise again my why of why I want to change the education system and why I think it's so important. So I'm grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute privilege, and it's been really nice for me to reflect on a period of my life which was very important to me, and which I still, believe in. So thank you for allowing me the pleasure of that.
Amazing. And that, as they say, is a wrap.